Good afternoon, colleagues. We're so excited to be here to be talking to you about the Enable framework, enabling accessible blended learning for equity. If your institution, workplace, space is anything like ours, we thrive on acronyms. So where possible, we'll try to explain what they are. But if at any point we say something and you double take, just stop us and ask us to define what we're talking about. Okay, let's get started. Here we go. Share and share. Cool. And you can see my screen well?
Yes.
Those it can. Okay, great. So we're going to do a bunch of little quick activities, and then it's going to center around a more longer activity where we think together as a collective around how we might make changes to our courses or our teaching or our facilitation, our workshops, in whatever way that you engage with education. And how we will get there is that we will first go through what exactly the Enable framework is. So enabling accessible blended learning for equity, what it is, where it came from, and we will illustrate some of the good practices at our institution that are exemplars of like Enable related course design and work. Then Lara will talk us through the course design tool, which is one of the artifacts that came about from the Enable framework. We'll then get you to think a little bit about your own course, your own space that you teach, wherever your sphere of influence is around engaging people in a community, and think about what part of the course design tool, which speaks directly to the Enable framework, is most interesting to you. Maybe it's a gap within your current practices, maybe it's something that you've really been thinking about doing. And we'll get you to think about that. Another lovely aspect we've included is some quiet reading time. So we'll set aside 10 minutes so that you can explore some of the materials around the Enable framework that you're most interested in, that really excites you. And then we will have that bigger session where we will talk about what we flagged as perhaps areas for development or things that we have been working on or been struggling with, and basically get some peer support. Because we're a smaller group, we don't need a breakout room. I think we can do it in plenary, and that should be fine. And then that way, we will basically just basically don't need to do the collective harvesting because we'll be hearing each other's conversation live. So you may get 10 minutes back of your day. And then finally, Lauren will take us through a checkout. Okay, so we've already asked the question, do you mind if we record this session? So that's there. But the other thing that I wanted to find out is how you are arriving in this space. It's been a week. For me, I'm not feeling so well, and so I'm arriving in the space a little bit snotty and sniffly, but I'm happy to be here. And how I would like to structure this response is that we're going to use an image, which I've described in the text chat. So you can either use the image on the screen or use the descriptions in the text chat to tell me what person, blob, you identify with most right now in this moment. And if you could please describe it instead of just saying the number so that everybody can participate in this, and maybe say a little bit about why it is that you're choosing that particular blob or that particular position that that person is in. And then we will start the session properly, but I just really wanted to see how everyone's arriving here today. Oh, that's really nice, Rebecca. Rebecca's sitting side by side because they love how the group encourages us to be alongside each other in our journeys as educators. That's great. Jenny's on summer holiday and doing a lot of encouraging, but not interfering with 3 kids. I hope that's going well. Um, I'll write mine. Hey, Vuyo, thank you for sharing. Working at home because student protests on campus. I'm in Cape Town. We're also in Cape Town. Okay, great. Lara says that they're sitting side by side because they're happy to be sharing the Enable work side by side with their colleagues. Right back at you, Lara. Just make sure. Give a moment or two if you're still writing. Vuyo, what university are you based at?
CBUT.
Okay, you're really close by. Lauren says that they're dangling from a low branch by one arm, swinging out, kind of fun and kind of scary, considering their work and studies happening at the moment. Oh, strength to you.
Which institution are you, Mishka?
Yeah, I'm based at the University of Cape Town, but I'm calling in from my home
Okay.
my home in Gardens, which is down the road from CPT if you're in the Cape Town campus.
Okay. Now I'm based on Bible campus.
Okay, so
I
not
think
that.
you guys, we have seen what is happening on the news from our
Yes,
side. So, yeah.
it's very hectic, and I hope you are hanging in there.
It's safer to work at home when it's hectic like that on campus.
Yeah, I think so too. Okay. If you haven't had a chance to share how you're feeling right now, because you either don't want to, or because you're busy doing something else, or because whatever the reason, or you're still typing, you can add it or not. It's up to you. Basically, the point of this beginning is to say that the way you arrive is the way that you arrive, and you accept it that way. So whether you're on the top of the tree, like so strong, feeling really good, or right at the bottom, not feeling good today, you're accepted in this session. Okay, so now I want to get to know some of you a bit. And I love using this activity. I've used it so many times in different spaces. It's called the name story. And I just think it's such a wonderful way to learn something about each other. We're about to spend a good chunk of time together with each other. So it makes sense to get to know each other a little bit better. Um, and I take this from, this is an Equity Unbound resource. And so I'm sure you've come across this already, and maybe you've done this before. But please humor me if you can. I'd love to hear the story of any one of your given or chosen names. So it doesn't have to be, it can be a name that even you've chosen for yourself. How is that name chosen? Were you named after someone, or did you choose to be named after someone? Does it have any cultural or historical meaning? Is there a story or experience that's related to your name that you'd like to share? And then, if you don't want to share about your own name, you can share a name that you like and why. And yeah, I'll give you some time to type that in the chat. And if you want to, you can just unmute yourself and share. That's also fine to do. I'll share mine.
Can I, Mishka?
Please, Buyo, go ahead.
Oh. Good afternoon, colleagues. My name is Vuyokazi. Vuyokazi is an African name. The Kazi is for female because in the African context there are a lot of Vuyos. There's Violetu,
Mm,
Luvuyo, Vuyo, but there's the Vuyo is either a prefix or a suffix. but mine is the Vuyokazi, mean the Kazi. Sounds like Islam. It means Vuyokazi means happiness or joy. Then my name, I was given this name by my mother, who share with me that there were twins born before me, but they couldn't make it. So she gave that name to me, saying that I'm her joy. So I'm a big joy for you, Kazi. When it's a Kazi, it means big in the African languages. So that is where my name comes from. It has nothing to do with the cultural, historical. There's nothing about that. Like for you, Kazi, it's just a joy. It's not associated with any culture. Like Hlubikazi. If I was a Hlubikazi, it was something like I'm from the Hlubi clan. I'm a Hlubi clan, but Vyokazi is just a name like that, an African name. But you must know if you are non-speaker of Xhosa, when we are being called Vuyo, it's either Vyolwetu or Luvuyo or no Luvuyo. But non-speakers of Xhosa, they call us Vuyo. Thank you.
Ndiabulela, thank you very, very much. I really appreciate that deep sharing. We have some stuff in the chat also. Jennifer is the full name. Their parents named them after Jenny Jerome, an American woman who ended up marrying an Englishman, Winston Churchill's father, and moving to the UK. I also ended up marrying an Englishman and moved to the UK. None of our children are currently in Parliament. That's fantastic. I love that. It's so specific. It's fantastic. Rebecca shares that their name is spelled differently than the typical American way. They used to hate it, but now appreciate its uniqueness. And also like how sometimes their phone will want to autocorrect it to rebels, which also works for me. That's perfect. Mine sadly autocorrects to mishap, which is not great. That's lovely, Vuyo, as well. We're hearing from Jenny. Lara says that they were born around their father's graduation. I didn't have a name for about 2 weeks. My parents couldn't decide, so eventually decided to scan the graduate booklet and saw Lara, which they like. Also from Dr. Zhivago. That's great. Oh, that's wonderful. Is anybody okay? Shireen. Her name is Shireen, which means a child's smile. I think it's Turkish or Farsi. That's wonderful. Yeah, my name, I was busy typing, but I think I'll just say my name means a small niche where light goes. And so it's, I think that that's quite beautiful. And in the Muslim tradition, the patriarch of the family, my father isn't Muslim, so it went to my great uncle. He whispers my name in my ear, and then that is how the name gets bestowed upon me. And there was this big fight around whether it should be Mishka or Anushka, because I'm half Indian, half Malay. And so they finally settled on Mishka, and I'm happy with that name. Great.
Yeah. My name is Persian.
Yes.
Nevertheless, I am Egyptian, and we have no relationship with any Persian twins. But nevertheless, our princess Fawzia, she was very beautiful, very very beautiful. Up till now, yani, they are talking about her beauty, and she was married to the emperor of Iran, or the king Shah Iran, and she has a daughter, and she named her as Shahnaz. And my mother was so in love with this princess. She liked her so much, therefore she has named me after her daughter, or Fawziya's daughter, the princess of Egypt. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing, Shainas. That's so wonderful. That's so wonderful. Um, Lauren says that they were named after their grandfather, Lawrence. Is that correct, Lauren? who unfortunately never met. He passed away before I was born. My parents taught me that my name means victorious or victory, and I think that winning mindset really sunk in because I'm quite an optimistic person. That's so true. I can concur. Okay, I think that's everybody. If you didn't share or don't want to share, that's also fine. We will move on to the next part. And now hand over to my victorious colleague.
Thank you. Do you want to keep on sharing, or do you want me to take over?
I can click next for you. That help?
Okay, thank you. Okay, so thank you, Mishka, for that lovely, lovely intro and getting us all together and getting us to know each other a little bit. I really like that we're a small group today, so we can get into the depths of things. I'm going to take us through a bit of theory and more of a regular presentation type of part of our time together today. And I want to start off with talking a bit about UDL, or Universal Design for Learning. I don't know if you've come across it, or if you use it, or if it's the first time you're hearing about it, but we want to start with this because it is a big part of the Enable framework that we'll talk about in a bit. Thank you. So, Universal Design for Learning is a curriculum and instructional framework it's based on neuroscientific research, and it focuses on the brain and what it does, or how it recognizes and processes and organizes information that comes in. Um, UDL also speaks about how information is evaluated, or how you respond to it. And at UCT, we use UDL to design learning, and we use it to design learning that incorporates flexibility in how information is presented, in how students are supported in expressing what they learn, and then also to create ways for students to engage with the learning. And this quote that is on the screen at the moment speaks to why we incorporate UDL so much. It says UDL strives to remove discriminatory practices as the learning needs of most students are taken into account when instruction is designed at the forefront. So thereby seeking to eliminate the need to retrofit teaching practices with specialist accommodations after the fact. And so whenever we design or redesign something, we do it from a universal design of learning standpoint. This is also a little bit more context of the neuroscientific background of UDL. So the research around UDL suggests that there are three primary learning processes that can be mapped out to different parts in the brain. And these three learning processes are the affective process, recognition process, and strategic process. And so the UDL guidelines and principles essentially focuses on activating these three processes, and in doing that, to address the diversity in learning, and that the three main categories of UDL speak to. So designing multiple means of engagement, designing multiple means of representation, and designing multiple means of action and expression. Okay, then the biggest goal of UDL is to support learner agency, and all of the guidelines and the principles that UDL sets out
is to support the capacity for to support learner agency, which is the capacity to actively participate in making choices in service of learning goals. And this focus on learner agency is a new-ish change to UDL. It came out last year, I think, with UDL 3.0, and where they focused much more on learner agency and expanded and deepened the description they had around learner agency. CAST, a quote from CAST that is on the screen reads, "There are no prerequisites to agency. Everyone possesses agency, and well-designed learning environments support and honor the emergence of this agency rather than claiming to create it." And that is the refocusing of UDL described here. And then go back quickly, Mish. So through UDL, we want to design accessible, inclusive, and equitable learning environments that support manifestations of learner agency that are purposeful, reflective, resourceful, authentic, strategic, and action-oriented. And those words, CAST decided on that are the sort of the outcomes of what a student manifesting their learner agency would arrive at. Okay. And then I want to focus on where we are coming from, myself, Mishka, and Lara, in terms of our context here at UCT, the University of Cape Town, in the very tip of South Africa. And we, in terms of our context and our history, South African higher education operates inside a very complex landscape with deep structural inequities. And these are rooted in colonization and apartheid, and then also compounded by persistent socioeconomic inequality, causing uneven access to education throughout a child and an young adult's school career across the student population. And so it's against this backdrop that we have the question of who has meaningful access to quality higher education, and that it's not, and under what conditions do they have those access. So we're saying that it's not a matter of providing resources and tools and technology. It's not pedagogy. It is actually a matter of social justice that we are considering in this question of who has access to quality higher education. And then it's with this in mind, with this context in mind, that the Enable framework came to life. This was developed within our department where we work at by our colleagues in collaboration with lecturers and staff at UCT. So now I'm going to go through the Enable framework and just briefly talk about what it entails. So on the screen there are a half circle with some blocks indicating the different elements of the Enable framework. And so I'm going to start on the left-hand side, where the first element there is deliberative course planning. The second element is student-centered learning. And third is responsive teaching and online engagement. Fourth is flexible assessment and feedback. The fifth element is expansive evaluation and reflection. And then in the middle of that half circle is accessible course materials and technology. And it's in the middle of the other elements, specifically so that it indicates accessible materials and technology relates to everything else that is part of the Enable framework. And then also there is a little, it looks like a smile inside the half circle, and that is to indicate communication and how it is also included in all of the other elements. Just going to take my notes. Okay, so each of these elements, and then each of them cover subtopics within that element, describing how equitable course design can be implemented within that element. And then, no, go back. The resources in the element are Google Documents, and all of these are open educational resources. We will send around the presentation afterwards, I think, which will include links to these documents. And then, yeah, the topics have both theoretical and practical components. And the theoretical components outline the principles for equitable blended learning that we base the theories on. And the practical components include strategies that you can apply in your pedagogical context where you're at, in terms of applying accessible and inclusive teaching practices. Okay, that's it. Thank you, Mish. You can move on. So now I'm going to talk about two case studies that we have here at UCT of lecturers who either already implemented what we offer through the Enable framework, or took something from the framework and made it part of their teaching and learning. The first case study is Dr. Campbell, who teaches a first-year social work course of approximately 450 students. But this class includes first years through to fourth year, because it's an elective that students outside of the discipline can choose to take. And Dr. Campbell really wanted to understand the diversity of this group of students, given the variety of experiences, ages, levels of study, and she wanted to make her teaching approach more inclusive and responsive to the unique needs of the students in her class. And so what she did is, from the deliberative course planning element, she decided to implement the strategy of creating a student survey, an online survey, which is in a Google form that we provide a template for it, and then it can be customized according to your class and your context. And it asks students about their interests, their experiences, knowledge, skills, as well as their preferences and personal constraints. And so it was anonymized, and the survey responses were also shared in the class to create a sense of community and for her to respond to questions that came in through the survey. And the survey, what it did, it made a big difference to her knowledge of who's in her classroom, as well as the students in terms of who are their peers. And it helped to normalize students' self-identified areas of underpreparedness or acknowledge the existing knowledge and made them feel more comfortable. And where possible, Dr. Campbell made adaptations based on the students' responses. For example, explaining why the group work that students rated as not so popular, why it was essential for that course specifically, and helping them to understand the context around that activity. And Emma was also able to provide information about specific student support services that related to challenges that the students shared in the survey. Okay, and then moving on to the second case study from Associate Professor Winfield. He teaches a first-year accounting course of approximately 700 students, and he uses the learning management system that we have here at UCT called Amatuba, which means opportunities to create a learning pathway for students to work through on a weekly basis. So the course site reflects the structured format of the course and is organized into weeks. And each week contain about 5 to 7 lessons that students work through, consisting of videos, quizzes, and maybe a practice exercise. So the required activities, which are the knowledge quiz is one of them. Students have to work through before they can access the next week's content. So a student can also go through the quizzes repeatedly until they get 80%, which is at that point where they can proceed to the next one. And so these are short knowledge checks of 5 to 10 questions marked immediately on Amatuba, and students also get feedback whether they get the question correct or incorrect. And what these knowledge checks do is they provide indications of progress, both for the student and for the lecturer. And then what Professor Winfield does is he uses the quiz completion as statistics to monitor engagement as well, and maybe step in if he needs to, based on what the learning analytics indicates on his course site. My notes says that's it. Thank you, Mish. I'm handing over to Lara now.
Great. Thank you, Lauren. So I'm going to be talking about the course design tool, which is one of our Enable tools, another open educational resource. I'm going to just post the link quickly in the chat. Before I get into that, are there any questions so far or any other comments? Okay, great. You're welcome to post in the chat or just unmute and we can discuss. I think maybe I'll just share my screen quickly so I can chat through the tool. Okay, is that all right?
Yes, it's perfect, Lara.
Okay, Zoom is so, I don't know, there's so much clutter that I'm used to from Teams. Okay, but this is the course design tool that I posted a link to in the chat. It's something that we developed. So Lauren described the Enable framework and all the different components, and obviously there are a lot of resources related to each component. And then we also wanted a more kind of practical, hands-on way to bring those elements to life and for people to reflect and consider those aspects in their environments, whether it's you teaching a course or you facilitating some kind of group engagement, or even if it's just an interest in terms of course design. And we see it as quite a malleable tool, so something that you can use for your own self-reflection, or maybe when developing a new course or redesigning a course. So we found, obviously, during COVID, there was a lot of quite intentional design from completely in-person courses to more blended modes. And obviously, Enable is focusing on that blended aspect and making that as inclusive and accessible as possible. Also, our university had transition from one digital learning platform to another. And for anyone who's been through that experience, they know how much of a momentous occasion it is and how much it requires reconsidering your course design. And it is a great opportunity to think through those things. And then also in terms of reviewing existing courses, so wanting to review and refine for the next iteration of your course. So those are some ways we thought it could be used. And the sections reflect the sections of Enable, obviously the same sections, but for each one we have several questions or prompts that get you to think about your own context and where you perhaps maybe see gaps or things you want to work on or things that you could improve in your course design, broadly named. I mean, this could be group facilitation or other, not only formal courses. And so it is a Word doc that you can download. You have the ability to obviously fill in your observations. If you do have learning designer that you work with or know of, it could be useful to have their comments, but also it could be your course team comments. So it could be you or colleagues or tutors or other people you work with in terms of course design. And what's also quite nice is that the prompts often have direct links to the relevant resource in Enable. So for example, if I'm saying, okay, is my course outline comprehensive and readily available? I haven't really worked much on my course outline, so I can click on the link and open this, and this is one of the Enable docs that has some information about course outlines and some guidance on things that you could include in your course outline. So yeah, it's definitely a lot of practical advice and practical resources that should be quite helpful for anyone working in an educational space. Yeah, so you'll see that they follow those sections as I mentioned. And then, yeah, I'll stop sharing that for now. And I can share that. Oh, I should have just continued sharing. Sorry. Sharing the presentation.
Nice to take a break in between.
It is. Yeah, does anyone have any questions on the course design tool? Oh, yes,
I have one. How did it go when you were developing something that needed to be used by so many different parties? So it's tricky, isn't it, designing a course because there are lots of contributors and they need to almost all feel welcome in the tool. So when you've got one that's also doing something like this, which is pushing for a specific approach, right, a more inclusive and universal approach to designing it, how did the process feel when you were developing that? That way of working together almost. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so I think our departments, we work at the Center for Innovation and Learning and Teaching at UCT, and it's primarily a teaching staff facing department. So I would say that's primarily what we had in mind. And because the broader project the goal was looking at enabling an inclusive blended learning. So we were really looking for a tool that addressed some of those needs. But we also recognized as we developed it that, wow, it would be great to have, the tutor perspective on these things. It would be great to have a student perspective. So we wanted to keep it quite open and not very prescriptive. I don't know, Mishka and Lauren, if you want to comment on that.
Well, I think Jenny, you are highlighting a common, I guess, experience of trying to get people to buy into a particular way of designing. It's not hard to sell, inclusive education, but actually doing the work is takes some shifting of minds and practices, etc. So alongside just putting out a resource, we wrapped lots of advocacy around it. So we ran workshops for each of the elements. We, ever possible in any fora, we would do sessions on Enable. We tried to get into the university has this new academics program. So we got a slot at the new academics program so that when staff start at the university, like they see this as the golden standard of course design. And we also, through the cases that Lauren shared, we're trying to find existing champions of inclusive education so that it can kind of spread like mushrooms. I don't know how you say, that people could see people in their spaces doing inclusive education in simple and sometimes challenging ways, but actually managing to do it, and seeing those cases, I think, became really important for the advocacy work because, as Lara mentioned, or Lauren mentioned, that some of these folks were doing this in spite of the Enable framework. So there's a lot of people that have been doing really good inclusive education work that didn't have language for it or were calling it something else. And so just like getting us, speaking the same language. We're still working on it though. And we try to, fold in the Enable kind of principles and practices in our own course development work. So we help develop new courses or people who want to go from in person to online. And so we have a little bit more agency in those kinds of projects. But yeah, I hope I answered your question.
No, yes, it was brilliant. And I think highlighting the need for the advocacy as well as the support is really, isn't it? Because when we're talking about a change of culture as well as a change of practice.
Yes, exactly. And I will say that we do often speak to the same people in the room. So the people that are for inclusive education and like have identified themselves as those kinds of champions, they're often always in those workshops. So we have to do a bit more work about getting like a more wider reach and getting other people involved as well.
No, thank you. It's grand. Thank you.
Yeah. And I think also, being able to develop a framework and put kind of a name to certain things is very useful in trying to more strongly embed it in an institutional culture when you can start discussing it and having the names and the tools to actually support that. Yeah, so what we wanted to do for a few minutes is if you're able to open that link in the chat of the course design tool, to have a look and think about, we spoke about the elements in Enable previously, thinking about an element that in your context, whatever that context is, that sparks the most interest or you feel is most relevant or you feel, like I really have a gap here in terms of, student-centered learning. I feel like I need to be more student-centered, or I feel like I could work on my teaching to be more responsive and inclusive. So to think about one of those elements, and to access that document and maybe just jot down some of the answers, your own answers to the questions or prompts that you find there. We do have, I don't know, Mishka or Lauren, if you mind sharing, we have a little Padlet board, if you prefer to jot down your ideas in a digital kind of brainstorming way. But you're also welcome to just jot them down in whatever way you choose. And then also considering your constraints, because obviously there are beautiful, amazing, innovative things we can do with course design if we have unlimited budget and unlimited time and no other responsibilities. But we need to consider what are the constraints within that environment. Yeah, so if we can give you a few minutes to do that, and how you kind of answer those questions and think about, the gaps that you want to work on, that will inform the next activities that we continue with. Are there any questions about that activity? Okay. Great, then I think We will just give it a few minutes, maybe 5 minutes, and then we can check in again.
Or maybe 10 minutes, Lara.
Okay, should we do 10?
And do folks want music or do you want silence? Well, the majority will rule here. And so you suggestion. So at least one of us are on top of things, which is good. Um, yeah, so Lara, I think this is still you, so I'll hand back to you. Oh, no, not yet. It's me now, right?
I think so.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. Okay, so you may have used the Padlet to write some of your activities or some of the areas that you want to focus on, either it being a gap or something that you just are really motivated by, something that really catches your eye, you're really interested in. So that's perfect. And so now what we want to do is we want to give you a little bit of extended time so we can listen to more music, to go into the Enable framework itself and look at that particular area, see some of the resources, click on the links, guide your way through that section. It may not solve for the gap you identified or the area that you're particularly interested in or working on, but it might spark some ideas for you or just get you generating thoughts about that particular aspect of the Enable framework. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to put in the chat the Enable index. And we're doing it this way because it's a huge resource and there's not time to go through everything. So if you're interested in multiple, that's also absolutely fine, but we've set aside some time for you to read, particularly related to your area of interest. And how the Enable index works, I'll just share my screen share so I can show you if I can find the screen. There it is. Okay. So how it works is as follows, is that you've got on the left-hand panel, if you tab through it, you can get through all of the elements that Lauren described earlier, those different blocks that make up the smile and the circle in the middle. Or you could just go into the document, the document space itself, and you'll find the various elements are given a heading. And so you'll be able to navigate and see all the different resources related to, say, for example, deliberative course planning, if that was an interest of yours. And so here are the subheadings and the resources. If you were more interested in student-centered learning, and then here are all the resources related to student-centered learning, responsive teaching, etc. So we're going to give you some time to go in and explore, dig, get accustomed to the resources related to the area that you are, excited by. I'll stop here. And this requires reading, so I don't know if you need music or if you prefer silence. Again, I'll take a vote in the chat. Perfect. Welcome back. So what we've done now is we've shown you what the Enable framework is. We've let you explore the course design tool. You've established something that you're interested in exploring a bit further within the Enable framework through that tool. And we've given you some time to read. Now we want to get you thinking about what particular solutions you could gather from a community of peers, listening to either the gap that you identified or something that you're working on in relation to inclusive education that you're really excited about, but there are some constraints around it. And the idea is that we would use the space as a sort of peer advice circle, as it were. I'm looking at the numbers. There's enough of us here to just stay in the main room. Lara, Lauren, Jenny, Rebecca, you have any thoughts about that?
I think it's small enough for us to have a group discussion.
Okay,
Maybe
Mm.
put the slide up briefly so that
I
people
will. Okay, I will. That's a good idea. Okay, so we did that. I didn't realize that these are firemen. There's a picture of firemen that has nothing to do with this, but it just saw people putting their hands in a circle, and so that is why that image was selected. So, basically, what I'd like to establish before we get into the nitty-gritty of the actual sharing is that the idea behind this is that you share your reflection that you either did in the Padlet or on a separate piece of paper or on your computer based on the activity that Lara guided us through. And then the idea is that you get the advice from the rest of the group, and then we basically all go around and do this, and we repeat until everybody has shared. But because we're not in a breakout room, I wanted to say that we could still consider this as a sort of breakout room of sorts, and that we should probably establish some culture for our breakout room, for our plenary discussion. And so some of the questions are about introducing yourself. Do we want to establish certain guidelines so that, should everyone's cameras be on? Should everyone be quiet while the other person shares? Should we wait for everyone to give advice? How do we want to do that? Does anybody have any strong opinions about what our plenary guideline should be? I'll pause here. Nothing in particular? You're okay with just going round? Okay, perfect. Okay, so I'll start and then we can just go from there. So the area that I think I've seen the most, that I've learned the most from is, as Lauren shared, is the pre-course survey. So I recently co-convened a course called Designing for Social Justice. And it was really, we're a team of mostly people working in a university, but our students are from different sectors, so corporate, non-government organizations or non-profit organizations, school teachers, facilitators, all the anybody who would consider themselves as designing learning. And so what really worked really well for us is that because our course is part of a wider program, we used the pre-course survey and we used that in the actual course itself. Where things kind of broke down and where there was this gap is that even though our course was so focused on social justice and we did the thing right, we did the pre-course survey, we gave the feedback to students, we changed our course, there were still students that throughout the course, we kind of lost them along the way. Like they would become more quiet in the sessions and no amount of really on the onset thinking about and designing for every student in the class did we manage to still, be capture those students, for lack of a better word, for all the students in the class. So I guess that's my question is how do you, when you are dealing with the huge administrative task of running a course, teaching the course, designing the curriculum, marking, keeping up with the students, making sure that you know who they are, but then you lose some of them along the way. I really need some advice around strategies for that. And I don't know if that comes from responsive teaching or if that, because we kind of thought we dealt with it with deliberative course planning, but it's kind of like a responsive teaching issue. Um, I mean, it wasn't many, but it was still one student is enough. So yeah, I don't know if anybody has advice for me.
Well, Mishka, I felt the same, and I've been feeling this for the last couple of semesters, actually, since the pandemic. And I feel that same sense of loss when a student just kind of drops off. And I've been trying to adjust my expectations to sort of meeting students where they're at. So I recognize that as much as I may want to reach out and try to draw these students in and engage them, I also recognize that for some students, they just don't want to, and that's okay. And for me to kind of be okay with that, for me to recognize that the kindness that I show to them and trying to draw them in, if it's not received or if it's not embraced, to not see that as a failure on my part, but just to be authentic to myself and to recognize that if they don't respond, then they know what they need and they might not need to respond to me. So if that makes sense, like I do the due diligence, like I follow up, I try to make sure that everything's okay on my end. But if they choose to disengage, then I respect that choice and I just try to give them the course experience that they set out for myself. So I don't know if that helps, but I feel that pain too because I want them to be taken care of, but I also recognize that they know what they need. And if I'm available, then hopefully they'll reach out. So I don't know if that helps, but I also have felt that same sense of disconnect in the last few terms. And yeah, so lots of solidarity there.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. Does anybody else have advice for me? Oh, it was really helpful. The point about kind of meeting students where they're at, just like a mantra, like I need to put that on a wall somewhere.
Misha, I was wondering when you were speaking, because similar to I think everyone, I don't know if it's a change since the pandemic or whether we became more sensitive to it because we all swapped online and it became really fractured in that relationship. So I don't know whether we're just more sensitive or how big the change is sort of data and evidence wise, but I find myself having to ask, is this my need or their need? And have I built the module and the learning experiences to sometimes acknowledge both of those things? So I think sometimes when we're designing learning, we forget about our needs in the relationship, or sometimes we subsume them into other things, keeping students active, connecting them to each other, all this kind of thing. And then we kind of assume we can connect other places throughout or almost on an ad hoc or less formal way. But I think sometimes we almost design ourselves out of it, and sometimes that's appropriate. So we deliver a module that's actually fully asynchronous or blended. And every year, some students decide to do it fully asynchronous, and every year I miss them because I want to see them, but they want to do it, and we did that on purpose. And so that is my need. That's fine. That's right. They don't have to come. We did that on purpose, and so I know that's my need. But I think sometimes when we design the learning, we spend a lot of time with teaching staff because it's necessary, talking about how important it is from the student perspective. But you have to build yourself into. That's how it feels authentic, and that's how you build the relationships. So I guess I would ask myself, like, have I sort of built myself out? Where are the chances for me to share the things I love about MYFest, like how we start with how are you feeling? This is how I'm feeling. Do I do that? That can transform a room when you have a chance. And if it doesn't feel comfortable to share that way about yourself, where am I finding the connections in the content? It's something like that. Because I do think sometimes we forget, or we do it on purpose, don't we? We prioritize so much the student experience and their communities, and that is right. But we have to think too about the other side of the relationship to make it really work.
That's such a useful comment about did I build myself out of it, out of the system structure, etc. We tried using Bell Hooks's approach of any activity we set, we would go into the breakout rooms and participate as well. So like if you're asking something of someone, you should be able to do it too. And so yeah, but it's difficult. It is very difficult. But yeah, I guess those two pieces of advice are super helpful together, actually. Yeah. Does anybody else want to share? It's okay if not.
I have a question for Rebecca. I saw in the Padlet you mentioned you were thinking about ipsative assessment approaches in your context. So I'm interested, like, what are your ideas around that?
Yeah, I've never heard of that before. So I always love learning new ideas and new pedagogies. And I teach a technical communication course for second year engineering and other technical fields. And I'm really, my new thing is how do I empower students, have them increase their autonomy? And I love this idea of moving from student-centered to student-led. And so I was really thinking of ipsative. Am I saying it correctly? Ipsative? Am I saying that right? Ipsative, ipsative assessment in connection to empowering students when it comes to AI, because the course that I teach is a required course. And so a lot of times they come in and they don't want to be there. And fair enough. Like I often don't want to be there too. And but I want them to learn how to use these tools, these AI tools, in a reflective way that empowers them, that doesn't have them offload their learning, but helps them to use it to help them get past some of the roadblocks that may be stopping them from communication. So, grammar mistakes, some of the other more surface issues, but I really want them to learn how to be reflective about how they use AI and why they use AI. So I really appreciated that LLM that I mentioned in the chat that I put a link to because I started playing with it. And I think I'm going to create some kind of assessment where I introduce at the very beginning of the term the idea of using AI to write an email and how they feel about it, and then just kind of keep coming back to it, and then to kind of see how they feel at the very end of the term about how they use AI, right? So that they see it not as this magical tool, but they see it as, a way to help them. Like, for example, I'll use AI to help me when I'm having to write a really challenging email where I feel a lot of emotion about it, but it helps me to really understand what are the claims that I need to make and how can I best express myself versus getting it to do it for myself, right? If that makes sense. So I just really wanted, I feel like there's a big gap in the course that I teach. A lot of my colleagues are so against AI, and fair enough. But I think as a teacher, I feel like I need to be a mentor to these students and to kind of show them what it is, what it's capable of, what it is not, and how do they regulate themselves in their use of it so that it helps them to be the communicator they want to be and not the communicator they think they should be. Because I've been asking students in their disclosure forms just to give me an example of the prompts that they've been using. And it's been fascinating because I've had a student say, I said, make it me sound professional, make me sound good. And it's like, well, whose voice are you using here? So I'm really curious about this ipsative assessment and how I can kind of link this to academic integrity and getting them to understand what is AI and how can I use it in a way that doesn't offload the effort, but enhances my effort while still maintaining my own humanity, if that makes sense. And so I just have all kinds of wheels turning, but this has been really, really fascinating. So I hope that kind of helps to kind of get a little snapshot of what I'm thinking about. But I love the framework, and I just think these resources you've given us are such a gift. So thank you. There's a lot of work here in this document. I really appreciate it. So that's kind of where I'm at, Laura. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, that's good to hear. And I also think I really like the idea of being like quite open and transparent with your students about their AI use so that it's not this hidden kind of framed as a cheating device, but rather if you look at it from an ipsative way, it's like, well, how am I using it? Why am I using it? Why do I feel these certain ways about why I need it or I don't need it? And to think about that development over time, I think will be very, very interesting. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Who else is keen to share?
I can share. My name is Manisha. I'm a student in the EDI education doctorate program, Open Digital Education from Athabasca University. I work with the government of Alberta. That's my full-time job with Alberta Learning Information Services. My experience is the public sector, the government is putting in a lot of effort about how to use AI, documenting the process, idea generation, and various different tools, which are government authorized tools, right from Copilot, Cowork, Notebook LM, Gemini. I think it also has to do a certain degree of the relationship with Microsoft and different vendors, Anthropic, like different, because it's led by technology and innovation. So they want to say industry is developing and we are innovative. But the approach is different because I'm a student and I worked with the Muscogees Cultural College 12 years teaching and using AI for various different purposes. I find if storytelling, like I request students to share their examples, how they're using. Yes, the college has a guideline. So I'm a sessional instructor, so I have no authority to do anything. Why I'm sharing these different things about AI and assessment and use of AI within our own life, it depends on their institutions, their policies, and the supports they provide. So as a sessional instructor, I list the policy, but modeling, I use it a lot for visualization. And I work with a lot of Indigenous data. Now, I'm not going to go into Indigenous data and AI because that's a different story altogether, and open education resources. Just sharing with you the not complexities, maybe sensitivities and dynamics. It's like energy and momentums and the vibes. I don't know if it makes sense, but I'm trying to have a human in the loop approach. So these are all, I shared 3 different scenarios. As a sessional instructor, my modeling use of AI, and I find that some students are using it, whether it is infographic, data visualization, and AI is everywhere. Like some of my students love to use Canvas, and they're already using it, images in their presentations. Myself as a student of Athabasca University, going back to being a sessional instructor. So what I've started doing is I've started writing about assessments and AI, and I published 2 chapters in a book, land-based. We went to Jasper for a week, and it was excellent. Land-based learning. Actually, really, it opened my mind. And so although I'm jumping in different places because they're linked together, in this land-based learning, there were other professionals who already are practitioners, and like Dr. Michael Paskowicz, he is from University of Victoria. He introduced me to Notebook LLM, and Brandon Carlson, who is from Ontario, he is a student. He introduced me to, we were in Athabasca, and he was sharing. Oh, okay, I can share my chapters too. He was sharing his photos, and he was putting himself on top of the Athabasca River, like just letting like data visualization. AI is there everywhere. The thing, how am I using it as a student myself, is comprehension, cognition, too, in a good way. It's not negative. There's no overload over here. I call it a continuum, cognition continuum overload. It can become overload, but overload, it will become not just because of too much content. Overload is also because of time and my mental state. This cognition is, we are intelligent. Like, I don't know why cognition is linked to our neuro or how much brain we have or our intelligence. It's really not about, it's about my state of mind right now. And I have taught all adult learners. So for my own education, I find it, I make a mind map, I make a video, and I share. I am sharing because I'm an open educator. I believe in sharing and open modeling it, using it myself, the Creative Commons licenses. So, for example, it's about sessional instructors and their use of open education practices and professional learning. That's the topic I'm interested in, I'm researching. So when I find a new dissertation, I approach the researcher and I say, these are my notes I have taken, I want to prepare an infographic. And many dissertations have a CC license, but I want to build connection and get permission from the researcher, because we learn from humans, so human in the loop. And then I make a video, infographic, or a podcast and share it on LinkedIn, on within my own communities of practice, and also on Facebook, because I don't think AI use or open education use, there are multiple communities. Like, and from my experience of exploring and being innovative and working in tribal environments, people don't know what open education is or what is allowed. So I think assessments are fascinating, but why? Why should we be? It should be a painful process or a stressful process, because I've always taught all adult learners, like, why am I paying to go to school and getting so stressed about? And stress, I've seen it in my students. They eat too much, put on too much weight, like, mental health issues. So physical and psychological, they are weaved and integrated together. I'm sorry I missed the first part because it's a different time zone and I logged in at 8:30. But what I caught on is really fascinating, and I'm so glad to meet all of you. Um, you know, use it sensibly, process, document it. And there are so many, like I use it for cognition, comprehension. So I make slides out of it with the same content. Right now, I'm doing use of this open education interest movement in Western Canada. There are 4 different models when 4 different provinces are there. You know, um, funding structure is different, infrastructure is different, scholarly open education and AI publishing model. Like Athabasca University launched Remix publishing, which is a different way of scholarly publishing, intentionally using open education and using AI. So the scholarly publishing, and Athabasca University is known for IROLD, which is International Review, the journal which they have. But the scholarly publishing and having another arm, like this Remix, is also fascinating. Like, this is already happening in the environment. And I believe whatever we are doing, it's good to share. So that's open education, it's open assessments. But with ethics and principles and permissions, whether you're sharing it in the class or bringing your family members and sharing it, or just sharing it on social media, because then the momentum builds and some people will understand, like, to be teaching in small spaces where people do not know what open education is all about can be quite challenging. Thank you. I'm done. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Manisha. I wish that there was time for us to talk about how what you're saying links to these questions of inclusive education. So how do we think about, student-centered learning, student-led learning in relation to the time that we're living in? How do we think about flexible assessments when we're also designing around particular challenges that AI brings? So I wish we could talk more. Thank you so much for sharing. It's really, really
Just,
great
just,
to hear.
just 1 second. Sorry, just 1 second. You mentioned to put the links. I put the links. Student agency is most important, and each student had a different topic. And with that, we created a video resource list. So when I teach, I always create a resource list by asking permissions. These are TED Talks, Indigenous Scholars videos, and each student did a video reflection. It's there in the article which was published. Sorry, it's a book chapter. Thank you so much. But thank you for pointing me in the right direction. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Now over to you, Jenny. We weren't able to do our closeout, but I feel like we're at an end. We've run out of time.
This was wonderful. For those of you who attended the session, please don't forget to fill out the feedback link that we've dropped in the chat. If you want to continue, which it sounds like people do, feel free to join the Discord, and we've got the instructions there. We'll hand over to Yasser and Danny and a variety of other people